Hello, hello in UK Health Radio Land. I am Liz Larson, and I'm here with my friend,
Bill McKenna.
and we're the host of the New Life Perspectives radio show. And we just happen to be the team that created the Cognomovement system. And I have to say, today we have a very special guest that is near and dear to Bill McKenna's heart, has everything to do with his own origin story. I'm going to pass the mic over to Bill and let him introduce our very special guest. Take it away, Bill.
Oh, great. Well, gosh, you know what? I got to tell you all this story because it is absolutely bizarre how we ended up today, well over a decade later, talking with Neal Donald Walsch, the author of Conversations with God and many other books. So years ago, many years ago, there was one of my teachers who is a Catholic nun. Now, this Catholic nun told me a story of how she came about the work of Neal Donald Walsch. She had been taking care of a priest for a decade, and this priest could not take care of himself. So she was his caretaker. And the agreement was, listen, if you die first, you come back and you tell me what's going on the other side. What is all this about? I have so many questions about God and reality and why we're here and what's going on. And they had this agreement. Well, anyway, hit the fast forward button. Eventually, the priest dies. And this nun is sitting in the pew at his funeral. And there's the casket. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, she hears the priest's voice as clear as day, as clear as I'm talking to you. He's talking, she can hear it. And she's like, oh my God. He's saying, he's making fun of these, look at that priest Henry or whoever, he never even cared about me. What's he doing here? Blah, blah, blah. He's just yabbering and talking and making jokes. And she's like, looking around like, oh my God, this is crazy. And fast forward, this all of a sudden at night, he starts getting up and dictating to her all the miraculous things on the other side of why we're here and what's going on. Well, it starts off and she starts dictating, rapidly dictating, but on the other side, there's no time. So things are moving very quickly and she's trying to collect what he's saying. As the days go on, he speeds up. It's harder and harder for him to communicate with her. And finally, after a period of time, she finally just closed the book and said, listen, you know what? You got to find a different way to communicate with me because it's unintelligible now. I can't keep up. So anyway, literally, now this nun, as many nuns were back in those days, is a teacher. And she goes off, to teach at a school. And then that day, the doorbell rings at the convent. And ding dong, yes, can you please give this to, the blah, blah nun? And he hands over the Conversations with God book. And then again, a second time that day. And these are all people that no one had ever seen before. Bing bong, again, second time. Hey, listen, can you give this to the nun? Third time. 3 times that day. Bing bong. Again, 3 times that book showed up that very day. Now, the lessons, the information that came out of that book. If I would have just picked up that book, which I've read many, many books on spirituality, especially back in those days, I would read everything I get my hands on. But, you know, they're books that you would just breeze through and you'd be like, oh, I don't know. It's this guy talking, you know, it's not, you know, I don't know what's real and what's not real. Maybe I get a good concept or an idea, but I have to tell you, after she had read that and the priest was like communicating that, the dead priest was communicating, I took that book and boy, oh boy, did I take it seriously. My Conversations with God book is marked up. And I'll tell you, once you know this and you read the book with that lens, the eye-opening perspectives that happen for you, that you will see that, you know what, you didn't do anything wrong here on the planet Earth, that you were learning, that you created this reality, all kinds of wonderful things that were mind-blowing, especially for somebody that was Catholic, like there is no hell, like I'm not going to punish you and you have free will. These concepts were so foreign to me, and being able to change my mind changed my life. So anyway, without further ado, I want to introduce to you Neal Donald Walsch, who's changed the lives of millions across the globe, even though they didn't have the benefit of knowing for sure, like I do, that things that he is putting forth are actually true. They're validated from the other side. So here we go. Neal, tell us about your current work and tell us what you got to say.
Well, thank you for that introduction, Bill. I appreciate your telling that story. It confirms for me, of course, what I have experienced myself. I did have what I call a conversation with God at a moment of tumultuous activities in my life. It came, Bill, after I spent a year living on the sidewalk. I was what is known in America as a street person because I had lost my job, I had lost my income, my relationship had fallen apart, I had nowhere to go, nowhere to live. And so I was living outside on the street, not for a few bad weeks or a couple of tough months, but for a year of my life. And I spent a year outside with no income of any kind. So I have to walk up to people and ask them if they would maybe be willing to share whatever little they might have to share with me, getting quarters and dimes and nickels and half dollars, and maybe once in a great while some folding money from people on the sidewalk. And that's how I ate. At the end of the day, if I was lucky, I had enough to eat. But I slept on the ground. I did have a tent. I managed to get a tent. And that's how I lived for a year. So I'm telling that story because when I finally got off the street, I found myself a little part-time job. And I got off the street. I had a car accident. An older gentleman turned in front of me, as luck would have it. And it was a pretty bad smash up. And I broke my neck. My neck snapped. I actually heard it. And I thought, this is not good. So I didn't move. The police came relatively quickly. Somebody witnessed, and they saw that this man had turned in front of me. They called the police. And the police took me very gently. They said, well, this is not good news. That sound you heard in the back of your neck. Turned out I had a broken neck. Bill, I had a 3/4 inch avulsion fracture. I remember the words vividly because I saw the words on the examination form. It said 3/4 inch avulsion fracture of the 7th cervical vertebrae posteriorly, which is a big fancy way of saying I didn't have a hairline fracture in my neck. I had a fracture big enough to put a pencil through.
Oof.
This is not a good thing, and they of course stabilized me and did what they had to do. Then they put me in what's known as a Philadelphia collar. It's a therapeutic device that holds your head up. because your neck is no longer able to support your head. And the surgeon said, you're lucky to even be alive. A fracture that big, it's amazing that you're alive, much less not paralyzed, because I was able to move. I had limited movement, but I was not paralyzed from the neck down. So ultimately, I did find a little bit of work, and I was able to get a job in broadcasting, which didn't require me to do much movement. I was able to just sit in one place and talk, press a microphone switch and go on and off. And that's what I did. So I was able to do that. And I found a little house. This is my little long story. But I woke up one night and I asked God, okay, what's going on? I don't understand. I'm 50 years old. Why are these things happening to me? Because, Bill, I have been given the triple whammy in life. My relationship had fallen apart. I had lost my job, not because of a bad performance, but the company I was working for was downsizing. And I was last in. I was a new hire. So last in, first out, seniority. So I was out of work. My relationship was falling apart. And then I had this accident with the neck thing. So I thought, okay, the triple whammy: health, relationship, and income. Nice. So I said to God, I woke up at 4:30 in the morning one night. There was a coffee table in front of me with a yellow legal pad on it. And I picked up the yellow legal pad for no apparent reason, just writing an angry letter to God. I said, Dear God, what does it take to make life work? I wasn't a young man, by the way. I wasn't 23 or 33 or 40. I was 53 years old. And so at this point in my life, I thought, I should have things pretty much together. How long is it going to take? And so I remember sitting there, Bill, asking God, what do you want from me? What do you want from me? What have I done to deserve a life of such continuing struggle? And somebody tell me the rules. I'll play. I promise I'll play the damn game. Just tell me the rules. And after you give me the rules, don't change them. Because I had the experience that the rules I was taught were being changed anyway, hour to hour, day to day. I didn't know which way was up, what I was supposed to do. And I was really angry. I was writing so deep on that yellow legal pad that 3 or 4 pages down, you could still see the imprint. That's when you're writing, really, really pressing hard. And I heard a voice over my right shoulder. Neal, do you really want answers to all of these questions? Or are you just venting? I turned around, of course, there's nobody there. I thought, great. On top of everything else, I'm losing my mind. Terrific. But I remember thinking, ironically, and I wrote down on the yellow legal pad, I am venting, of course. But if you've got answers, I'd sure as hell like to know what they are. And a thought came to my mind. Wouldn't you rather be sure as heaven? So what's that supposed to mean? And I wound up receiving messages that created other questions in my mind. So I was involved very quickly in a dialogue, question, answer, question, answer, question, answer, that continued for many, many, many handwritten pages, not 5 or 8, but 50 or 60, until I read through the entire tablet. But by now it's morning time, 9 o'clock, 9:30 in the morning. I had to go to the drugstore and buy another couple of tablets. I was out because I didn't want to abandon the process. Because I realized that it was making me feel so good. It was making me feel better. In fact, tears were coming down my face, tears of joy, like, wow, at least I'm getting some answers that for the first time in my 53 years are making sense. Answers about life, who we are, why we're here, what this is all about. What is God really? What does God want? What does God demand? What does God require? What happens if we don't meet those demands? All of those questions that people have. And I was getting answers that finally made sense to my soul. And I began to experience that I was having, by golly, a conversation with God. And I said, and I wrote down, why me? And the answer came immediately, Neal, no, it's not you. I'm talking to everyone, all the time. The question is not to whom am I talking? The question is, who's listening? So I said, okay, fair enough. So I continued to ask questions, continued to get answers. Somewhere in the middle of this ongoing dialogue, by the way, this now was going on for days, weeks. I kept this up every morning. I'd awaken almost automatically at 5:23, or I should say 4:23 in the morning. I just bolt upright, awake. I thought, okay, fair enough. It's time again. Got out my next yellow legal pad and continued the conversation. I thought of it as journaling. I thought of it as a therapeutic device, just personal therapy. Never occurred to me that anybody else in the world would even know about this, much less read it. But
Wow.
somewhere in the middle of this dialogue that was going on, handwritten for pages and pages, I was told, you will make of this one day a book, and it will be read, accessed by many people. And I thought, my first thought, Bill, was, now I've got you. Now I've got you, because that's a measurable outcome.
Yes.
Everything else that I was receiving, if I could put it that way, was conceptual in nature, theoretical, conceptual, could be, could not be, who would know? But here was a statement of fact. You will make of this one day a book, and it will be accessed by many people. That was a measurable outcome. So I thought, we'll see about that, because of course I knew it wasn't going to happen.
Right.
There's not a publisher on the planet who's going to, to take these handwritten notes of a so-called conversation with God and publish it. I mean, I could just see the publisher going out to the workroom floor and saying to his editors, hold the presses, hold it. I got a guy here who's talking to God. No, it's not going to happen. So in fact, I sent what I had written and received to a couple of publishers. And by golly, if one of those publishers didn't call me and said, hey, we want to publish this book. This is fascinating stuff.
And we have to, Neal, we got to take a quick break for UK Health Radio. Hold that thought. We'll be right back. Neal, continue. 4:23 every morning, and somebody out there said yes, they were interested in the book.
We wanted to publish the book. They said we don't want to. We're not going to call it Conversations with God, because it's going to be a turnoff. A lot of people will be pushed back by that title, and I had to fight for that. I said, wait a minute. I'm sorry. That's how I experienced it. If you don't want to call it Conversations with God, then we're not going to put it out, because they wanted to actually publish it as a book of fiction. They wanted to call it fiction, and maybe even science fiction. I said, no, it's going to be not fiction. It will not be sold as fiction. This will be a non-fiction book of a person's actual experience, or you won't publish it. And the publisher said, well, okay, we really like the material. We're going to publish it, whatever you want. You're the author. But, we can't give you an advance, of course, because you're an unheard of, unknown author. First-time authors don't get advances. But we'll give you your standard 15% royalty. And I guess we'll publish it under the title Conversations with God. And he was right. It didn't sell very many copies. I mean, not very many people read it. Well, 15 million, if you want to call that a lot. And it wound up being read by people around the world and translated into 37 languages. And with that kind of readership, in 37 languages, bunches of other publishers, very large publishers, Putnam, Simon & Schuster, people of that nature, called me and said, do you have any more like that? Do you have any, the old saying, do you have any sisters like that at home? And I said, well, I was continuing the experience. I hadn't stopped the experience. So at that point, I had many, many other tablets full of dialogue. They said, would you be willing to have us publish that? And so they did, in fact, publish what became Conversations with God, Book 2, Conversations with God, Book 3. There are now 9 Conversations with God books. There will be no more, as far as I know. I don't see that happening. And I think that the intention of the material has been met, and it has achieved what it set out to achieve. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. I have written, however, several books. There are 9 Conversations with God dialogue books, question, answer. I have written several books in support of those dialogues that help to explain from my deep understanding what the dialogue is seeking to get across and how to apply it in everyday life. So I've written, actually, it turns out, 30 other books. So I've published 39 books in total. The most recent of those 39 books is a book called The God Solution, which was published just about a year or so ago. And the God Solution is the answer to what I've called the God Dilemma. And the God Dilemma is this, Bill. People around the world, since I published the first books, have been asking me. Of course, I've been all over the world on lecture tours, I was sent on them by publishers. And so I was traveling the world and all over the place, Moscow, Tokyo, Rio de Janeiro. I was all over the world talking about these dialogues. And people were asking me, if there really is a God, if you didn't make this up, and they were pretty convinced that I wasn't lying about it. I wasn't making some piece of fiction up, but they still found it hard to believe that maybe I might have been, hallucinating or whatever. So if there really is a God, they were asking me right and left, why is the world such a mess? If God is supposed to be such a loving creature, why is the world such a mess? By the way, they were asking me these questions before what's been going on the past 2 years. And then now in the past 2 years, those questions have increased dramatically. Why is this happening? All that's going on in the world right now, not just the pandemic, but the economic challenges being faced by nations and individuals, the racial strife that we're seeing all across the world, of the difficulties that human race is experiencing right now. What's going on? If there is a God, why doesn't God just help us solve these problems? It's not like we're not praying. And by the way, statistics have shown that easily 8 out of 10 people, surveys have been taken. Sociologists have taken surveys. 8 out of 10 people believe that there's some kind of higher power in the universe, that there's more going on here than meets the eye. But interestingly enough, although 8 out of 10 of us agree that there's a higher power, we can't agree on what it is, what it wants, what it does if it doesn't get what it wants, how we can interact with it. We call those disagreements religions. And in case you don't know it, check it out. You can go on Google and check it out. There are 4,300 religions on the face of the earth. Separate, identifiable, individual faith systems called religions. 4,300 of them on this planet. And not one of them can agree with the other one of them about the fundamental basics of, who is God? What does God want? How does God work? What happens if we don't do what God tells us? But they all do agree on one, I should say, there is one area of agreement. They agree that God, if there is a God, is a condemning, judging, punishing deity. That if we don't do what God wants, God will judge us, condemn us, and punish us. And the list of things that God wants can get to be pretty minute, that some pretty small stuff. Like, and I'll tell you a little story here, Bill. When I was 9 years old, I was raised a Catholic as well. And when I was 9 years old, by the way, I thought I'd become a Catholic priest. I wanted to be Bing Crosby and going my way. I just wanted to do that. But at the age of 9, the priest came in once a week. He taught catechism, which for those of you who are not Catholic, that's a big fancy word meaning the doctrines and the dogma of the Roman Catholic Church. Fair enough. So the priest would come in and teach the children a little half-hour class in catechism. One Wednesday he came in, and I'm 9 years old. He teaches the class, if you miss Mass on Sunday, it's a mortal sin. And should you have an automobile accident, maybe, God forbid, get killed on Monday in a car accident, on Tuesday you'll be in hell. And I said, Father, no, I just missed Mass on Sunday. He said, then you need to go to confession, because if you don't confess that sin, you will be in hell, because missing Mass is a mortal sin. That is a major offense that sends you to hell for the rest of eternity because you didn't go to church on Sunday without a good excuse. Now, if you said if you're tending to a sick parent or you have to work, fair enough, but you got to have a good excuse. And now, at the age of 9, I'm trying to emotionally invest in the idea of a God who has such needs that if I miss Mass 1 week and I should happen to die before I got to confession, he's sending me to hell. If you don't think that'll send a 9-year-old to the confessional in a hurry, think again. So there I was in the confessional. I'm 9 years old. I'm a good kid. I'm not a bad kid. But I remember distinctly, Bill, trying to think up what I can say to this guy, because I had the one sin. I didn't go to mass that Sunday, but I missed mass. I went to play baseball. Actually, is what happened, at the local playground. But I say, bless me, Father, for I have sinned. My last confession was last week. These are my sins. And I'm thinking, I missed mass on Sunday. He said, I see. Is there anything else? And I didn't know how to tell the guy, no, there's nothing else. So I'm making stuff up. I talked back to my mother. I see. I swiped a quarter from my father's desk. I took a coin. I'm making up sins so I'm not wasting the guy's time. He says, okay, go out and say 3 Our Fathers, 3 Hail Marys, 3 Glory Bees, and he gives me his sign of the cross, in nomine Patri Filii Spiritus Sancto, amen, and sends me out of the confessional. And from that point on, I'm thinking, this can't be true. I can't believe that if there is a supreme being, she is so concerned about what I'm doing that she would send me to hell for missing mass 1 week of my life. And that began a new journey for me, which ended in my conversations with God at the age of 53, when I asked God, okay, obviously there's some data I don't have here. What is the missing data? And I began to ask a fundamental question of all of my audiences. Is it possible? Because I was giving talks around the world. And I would say it in front of every audience, from Moscow to Rio de Janeiro to Paris. I'm talking in Tokyo. I'm talking all over the world, and I'm asking a single question. Is it possible? Just possible. That there's something we don't fully understand here about God and about life and about who we are, the understanding of which would change everything. And then I would say to my audience, I believe there is. I don't think we understand truly who and what God is, who and what we are, what God wants from us, what God needs from us, what God does if we don't meet God's needs. I don't think we truly understand any of that. So, of course, the audience would say, okay, then what's the understanding? Big guy with all the answers. And I would have to say, no, I don't have all the answers, but I did ask God the questions. And he did give me the answers. So I said to God, what do you want? He said, nothing. Nothing? He said, Neal, I don't need anything. And I don't require anything. And I don't want anything from you. I simply love you unconditionally, just the way you are, because you are my creation. You are my beloved child. And I don't need anything from you. I created you perfectly just the way you are. And it was also made clear to me that, Neal, you're going to make mistakes. What you call mistakes. You're going to call certain things mistakes. And so will others in your species, because yours is a very young species. But I don't punish mistakes any more than you would punish a 3-year-old child for mistakes that the 3-year-old child would make. You don't say, go to your room for the rest of your life. Because, and I will never forgive you, God said to me something interesting. She said, Neal, I will never forgive you for anything. I said, what? What kind of a thing is that to say to me? He said, I don't have to forgive you because you cannot injure, hurt, anger, upset, frustrate, or damage me in any way, any more than that 3-year-old could do the same to you. Because you understand how a 3-year-old could say what she said or do what she did. You don't need any explanation. And Neal, I want you to write this on your bathroom mirror and never forget it. Understanding replaces forgiveness in the mind of the master. Understanding replaces forgiveness in the mind of the master. Oh my God. And so I was set free of my fear of God, set free of the anger of God. It was like a civil rights movement for my soul, freeing me at last from the oppression of my beliefs in a violent, angry, and vindictive God. And that's what we need on this planet right now. A civil rights movement for the soul, freeing humanity at last from its beliefs in a violent, angry, and vindictive God. Because guess what? Most of humanity is basing its behaviors on its understanding of God. 8 out of 10 of us believe in a higher power. And this is the kind of higher power we believe in. So we are emulating that higher power in our interactions with each other. This is what I call the God dilemma. And so I asked myself a few months ago, okay, if that's the dilemma, what's the God solution? And why doesn't God just come down and fix everything? I asked that question, and I was given the answer. If God came down and fixed everything, we would be nothing but minions. Minions in the kingdom who simply had to do what God tells us, and everything will be okay, and God will fix everything and make everything all right. But that wasn't God's intention. God's intention was to recreate itself in all of its creations, that each of its creations, all sentient beings everywhere, not just on Earth, but throughout the cosmos, would be given the power to produce and to create their own reality and their own experience. All they had to do was use the power that God gave them. But God is not going to come down here and wave a magic wand and make everything go away. God would just give us the power to make everything go away, which, by the way, we created all to begin with. So, so when I say to God, why is life the way it is? God says to me, why is life the way it is? And I say to God, well, why don't you just fix it? God said, well, why don't you just fix it? And I say to God, but you're the one who has the power. And God says, but you're the one who has the power.
Yeah.
See, you're not listening to me, because we have, human race has accepted the idea that we're separate. The biggest problem in the world today, there's a huge problem on this planet right now. And what I want you to know is that the biggest problem in the world today is that most people don't know what the biggest problem in the world today is. I mean, even our religious leaders don't know. The Pope, the Archbishop of Canterbury, the Chief Ulamata, head rabbi, they don't know what the biggest problem in the world today is. The heads of state don't know what the biggest problem in the world today is. Industrial leaders, economic leaders don't know what the biggest problem in the world. We don't know what the biggest problem. We know what the fallout is. The result of the biggest problem is quite simple: alienation. We are alienated from each other. And we are seeing alienation at a level these days more than I've ever seen in my entire lifetime. And I'm an old guy saying that. But in my nearly 80 years on the planet, I've never seen this level of alienation. It's them. They're doing it. They're the wrong color skin. They're the wrong political party. They're the wrong economic group. They're the wrong nationality. They're the wrong gender. They're the wrong sexual orientation. It's those guys. It's those guys. They're the problem. If they would just stop being and doing what they're being and doing, everything would be okay. Excuse me? I'm sorry. So we believe, because we have believed that we're separate from everything else. I'm separate from you. You're separate from me. And separation has created the illusion of differences so enormous that those differences are what's creating the challenges and problems on Earth. And it's just the opposite. The idea that we're separate from each other is what is stopping us from solving the problems that we ourselves have created. Whether we're talking about environmental problems, whether we're talking about political problems, whether we're talking about any problem that we're facing right now, all human-made, I would say man-made, but I would say all human-made problems.
Yes.
And what stops us from solving them, we can't even agree with each other on how to solve the problems that we have created, because we've decided that we're separate from each other. So the God solution, God said to me, is, how about if you simply redefine God? Come up with a new definition of God. I put this in the book, The God Solution, which is not a dialogue book, by the way. It's a straight narrative. But it describes the God solution, which is to do something more daring we've ever done before, create a theological revolution by coming up with a new definition of God that every major religion on the planet will disagree with. But we have to be idea heroes and say it anyway. And so what I do in the God Solution, I propose idea heroes. We'll come back in just a bit, but right now we have to take a short break. So don't go away. We'll be right back.
I love it. Never have we had a guest introduce our commercial. Here it is. And we're back. And I just want to set this up so that Neal can take us right into it. As you finish that last thought, you also shared that you would offer a process to our audience that they could take home and use today that will help them stay in touch with who you really want to be in the world. I mean, that's a huge statement on its own. You're going to give people something that will help them stay in touch with who they really want to be. So take it away, Neal.
That's how I will conclude my remarks. But let me continue where I left off before our commercial break by letting you know that we are being invited to create a new definition of God, a way of defining God that would be a contradiction, if not a direct violation, of all the belief systems of the world's major religions. It would take an idea hero to actually do that. So what I call for in the God Solution is idea heroes. Let me just give you a real quick example of what an idea hero is so you can know what I'm talking about. Galileo was an idea hero. Galileo said, oh, the earth revolves around the sun. Of course, the church taught in those days that the sun revolved around the earth, because the church's teaching was that the earth was the center of the universe. Humanity was God's greatest creation. And if that were true, then we must be the center of the universe. So the sun must revolve around the earth. So the church condemned Galileo, put him under house arrest. He died under house arrest as a condemned soul. It only took the Catholic Church 357 years to admit. The Pope finally said 350 years later, oh, I guess we were wrong about that after all. Galileo was right. But he wouldn't give up his ideas at the time, so we had no choice but to condemn him. It takes an idea hero to pronounce an idea, to announce an idea, to propose an idea that he or she knows ahead of time that most people are going to disagree with, and to announce the idea nevertheless. Ignaz Semmelweis is an idea hero. In 1844, he's a Hungarian physician, and he said, you know what, we could reduce the mortality rate in our children's ward, because he said we should probably sterilize our hands and use a sterilizing liquid. He was the first person to propose that. He was known as the father of sterilization, but before he proposed it, believe it or not, doctors didn't sterilize their instruments or their hands between procedures. They were going from the morgue into the birthing room without even sterilizing their hands.
Wow.
Of course, they drove him out of the medical profession. Dr. Semmelweis, this is a matter of history, died. He died in an insane asylum because he thought, am I going crazy? This can't be wrong. And of course, it turned out it only took about 120 years for the medical profession to say, hey, you know what? He was right. Let's sterilize and see if we can't reduce the number of unnecessary deaths in hospitals. I'm sorry. And Barbara McClintock said just a few years ago that there's such a thing as a jumping gene. She's a geneticist, an American geneticist. They drove her out of the profession. They told her, jumping genes? What are you talking about? She said, well, that would explain why you cannot predict characteristics consistently in the hereditary process, because genes can jump from chromosome to chromosome. They told her she was crazy. She stuck to her guns. She said, no, this is true. They said, no, you're nuts. This is crazy. What are you proposing? What's the matter with you? Until 1983, when they stopped calling her crazy, because she won the Nobel Prize in physiology. Guess what? So the point, we have to be idea heroes and come up with an idea that's so antithetical, so the opposite of what we are being told and taught by the world's religions, that it would take an idea hero to even suggest it. But here is the new definition of God: pure love. What if God was pure love? Then we would have a new basis, a new model on which to base our own behaviors. We could emulate a different kind of higher power. When I say this in front of audiences, which I could do before the pandemic, they would say to me, "Oh, Neal, everybody knows God is love. That we came to the lecture tonight to hear, we thought we were going to get a big revelation. Of course God is love. Everyone agrees God is love." I said, "Wait a minute. I didn't say God is love. I said God is pure love." "Well," they would say to me, "what's the difference?" The difference is that pure love needs, expects, requires, and demands nothing in return. And in order to allow yourself to embrace that new definition of God, you would have to decide that the God of our prior understanding has been mistaken, that she never needed, required, demanded, or expected anything from us in return, and that he's not going to punish us or condemn us or send us to everlasting damnation for any reason whatsoever, much less for missing church on Sunday. That God is not so needy that she requires us to obey his every command in order to stop us from going to hell, that there is no such place as hell. Now, to say that out loud, God does not punish or condemn or judge anything, would be requiring an idea hero. And that's what we need more of today. That's the God solution. Let's change our idea of God, which changes our idea of who we are. Since we are made, thank you very much, in the image and likeness of God, then all of a sudden we have lost our justification for being judgmental, condemning, and punishing of each other. And so we can now even dare to love each other the way God truly loves us. Can we? Are human beings capable of loving each other that way? We can't even love the person across the pillow that way, the person we spend our entire life with, the person we're sharing our days and nights with. We can't even love that person with pure love, needing, requiring, demanding, and expecting nothing in return. Unless we can. Unless we begin a new way of being human and model and demonstrate who and what God really is by announcing who and what we really are, each of us individuations of divinity. So are you ready now for me to give you that little process? You know,
Absolutely.
I have said to people have asked me, give me a tool. I love what I'm hearing you say. Can you give me a little tool that I could use to move toward that experience of myself? And so I invite them to say something. The first time they see any other person on any given day, maybe it's the first time you wake up and you open your eyes and you see the person on the pillow next to you. Or maybe it's the neighbor across the street. Or maybe it's somebody across town. But the first time you encounter any person and all the people you see for the first time that day, I invite people to say in your mind, don't say it out loud. If you say it out loud, you could be strung up. You will be crucified in one way or another, I promise you, because of where we are in our evolutionary development as a species. But say it in your mind. Say the following thing the first time you see any other person on any given day. I have come into your life today so that you may have life, and so that you may have it more abundantly. Your life will be made better today for my having passed through it. I promise you.
is really beautiful. Will you say it again one more time? Say it again one more time, just so everybody can really take it in and absorb it.
It again one more time.
Yeah. And then give us the tool one more time.
Oh, you said, would you say it again one more
Did
time?
say that.
And of course, I obey everything I'm told to
Okay,
do.
please give us the tool one more time. I think it's
Yes, here's the
something
tool.
you're gonna have to think about a bit. So
Yes, here's the tool.
yeah.
When I see my wife across the pillow, when I see my friend across the street, when I see a total stranger at the coffee shop, every time I encounter anyone, I say in my mind, I have come that you may have life and that you may have it more abundantly. Your life will be made better today from my having passed through it. I promise you.
Yeah, that's really, really beautiful. Even just the idea that keeping ourselves in that space, that we are coming into someone else's life to make it better, to add anything.
There's an old saying, no one crosses your path without a gift for you in their hand. I've heard that many, many times. But when I mentioned that in my conversations with God, I was told, no, Neal, you have it backward. It's the other way around. No one crosses your path without you having a gift for them in your hand. And so I said to God, well, wow, I never thought of it that way. How do I know what gift I have to give that person? God said, don't worry about it. The moment will show that to you. Trust the moment to reveal to you the gift you have. But remember this always, no one crosses your path without you having a gift for them in your hand. Why do you suppose I placed you there? Who do you think you are? Anyway, which of course is the question my father asked me from the time I was 14, but he didn't mean it in quite the same way. When he would say to me, who do you think you are anyway? But it's, of course, it's the most important question in life. So if I understand that who I am is an individuation of divinity, and that why I'm in any place is to demonstrate, to announce, to declare, and to express my true identity, my world changes overnight.
It's such a beautiful concept. And I just want to share a little something. When I first agreed to do the work that we do, on some level, we all make an agreement to do it. And mine just happened to be pretty literal. I realized that people would ask me questions I just had no business knowing the answer to from the time I was a little kid. But as a grown up, not that many years ago, I said, all right, I'll do it. I'll do it. So I'd find myself somewhere that I had no business being, maybe in the men's department at a sporting goods store, and be standing there. And maybe I might be there with my husband, and he would look over at me and say, you working again? Yeah. Pretty soon, somebody'd come along, a random person, and ask me the oddest question. And I'd think to myself, I have no idea. And then I knew. And I would give the answer. And then that person would walk away, and I would walk away. Never would see that person again. I'd never expect to. I didn't have any attachment to the message. But that's what it was. I had learned that sometimes someone would cross my path, a random stranger, and I'd be in the right place at the right time to assist with something for no other reason than that was my gift for the day. And I have to say, once I gave in and went ahead and decided just to do that, I realized that everywhere I go, there was something little I could offer. A smile, even a thought in my own mind when I saw something that I thought, oh, I feel bad for that. I would immediately change my thought and wish for them to be everything they ever hoped they would be in their entire life, whatever that was. So even just shifting my own thought, I have no idea if it helped them in any way, shape, or form, but it did help me, exactly like you're saying, to show up for who I wanted to be in that moment. So I really, really appreciate this tool because from personal experience, I know how valuable it can be in each of our lives. So we've come up against the end of this show. I can't believe it, Neal. That was so amazing, so beautiful. I hope our audience enjoyed it as much as we do. Please tell everybody how they can find you and what's next.
It's very simple. They just go to cwgconnect.com. CWG, of course, stands for Conversations with God. So cwgconnect.com is where I am. And what comes next for me is whatever life brings me. I have no plans at all except to be who I really am.
Beautiful. And we hope that for everyone else who's listening as well. The book is The God Solution. Of course, you can find it on all media outlets and Amazon, I'm assuming.
Yes, exactly. Yep.
All right, everybody around the world, we will see you again next week. Thanks for being here, Neal Donald Walsch and Bill McKenna.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.